You are at the Learning Lab, the first Learning Lab of the morning, social media for social good. So I just want to make sure this is where you're supposed to be. We are hoping that others will join us today. I am Julie Montgomery. I'm the VP of Membership and Partnerships at SID-US. We are now SID-US. If you participated in this morning's opening plenary, you will have learned that we just launched as SID-US. So we're really excited about that. So we have today we have Dante Licona. We are so excited to have Dante Licona in the Learning Lab. The Learning Lab, as you know, is different from the panel sessions. It's really interactive. So we're hoping for you to all get involved. Dante is going to be sharing his experience, really posing some questions to you. So we're really excited about today's session. So Dante Licona is the Senior Social Media Officer at the International Federation of the Red Cross, IFRC, and the Red Crescent Societies. He's going to talk about his experience and how IFRC and others have used social media platforms for social good. Before IFRC, he was working at the WHO, and before that, he was with the Mexican government working in various capacities. Working as a strategic communications advisor in the National Security Council, director of analysis at the Presidential Speech Unit, and a comms officer at the Mexican mission to the UN in Geneva. He is, clearly you can see he has a great experience in the social media and comms overall. So we're excited to learn from him. So I'm going to turn it over to Dante.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much to SID for the invitation, and I hope we will have the most interactive session possible today. So I hope you will join me with your questions, with your ideas, with your comments. So feel free to use the chat as much as needed, and I hope we can really have a phenomenal session. So let's take a look at the let's talk about social media for social good. So, colleagues, perhaps some of you may be already working on the social media directly on our sector, and you may be familiar with this specific situation when sometimes it's challenging to speak about the important work that we do in different organizations, in the humanitarian sector, in the development sector. Sometimes we are very focused on the technical aspects of the work that we do, rather on the impact and how people is really seeing the impact of our work. So if you haven't met before, Hal Reynolds is one of the most important cartoonists when it comes to communications and social media. So if you are interested in following her work, there is a QR code in this slide, and you can just find it over there. Let's continue, and let's start with some social media basics. All of the data that you will see come directly from the most important digital report crafted on social media trends by Simon Kemp in collaboration with We Are Social and Hootsuite. It's essentially one of the most important reads for all my colleagues in the space. So some of you might be familiarized with it, some of you may not, but it really gives you a sense of the data and why it's important to always take a look to the information of this specific environment. So what can we take a look at right now? Colleagues, which do you think is the most important reason of why people use social media platforms? Do you have any idea? Feel free to unmute your mic or feel free to drop your ideas in the chat so we can actually take a look at that. Taking a little bit of a time, I don't see yet any of your chats at the moment, but I hope you will help me with that. So some of the main reasons for using social media are, Catherine is saying, to share stories and inform the public about good work. Julie is also talking about how to learn about trends and to share about themselves. Well, the top number one reason for using social media is to keep in touch with friends and family. And I think that's always important to remember for us as communications professionals, that people are not really on social media to follow the work of the Red Cross or to follow the work of your organization for that matter. So it's important that we always remember that people really want to use those platforms to stay in touch with friends and family. And the second most common answer for reasons of using social media platforms is actually to fill some spare time, reading news stories, finding content, and seeing what's being talked about. But we also need to be mindful that people are not on social media to follow our organization or to follow our specifically. So that's why we need to get creative. That's why we need to start taking take the time to think about how can we really offer content that will be well received by the audiences that we want to connect with. Let's move on and let's take a look at where are the biggest numbers about digital presence. We know that around the world, there are 5 billion people, about 63% of the population, 2 out of 3 people that have access to internet. And we also know that 4.65 billion people are actually active social media users. What does that mean? That means that at least once a month, they actually come on and participate actively on the social media platform of their choice. This number has been growing steadily for the last couple of years. Let's remember that social media platforms are now in their teenage years. Some of them have been around for almost 15, 16 years. And some of them have really come to age with the challenges that we all see with what is reported and discussed about, no matter where you come from. The challenges that the social media environment faces are as big as the reach and their impact. Which are the world's most used social media platforms? Well, the number one, still by a long shot, is Facebook. Almost more than 2.9 billion people, almost 3 billion people are Facebook users actively using the platform every single month. There's no question, Facebook still is the number one around the world. It's clear that in some countries and in some demographics, it might not be the most used or the most popular or the most cherished or seeked out. But in some corners of the world, in some countries specifically, Facebook is the internet. So it's really important to always keep in mind that even though when we see some reports about some perceived discontent with the platform, it's still the number one in the world. Number two, we see YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. As you may have seen and use it probably yourself, YouTube is where people go to find answers and for their practical lives, for getting an answer in a video format. This is why organizations that have a smart YouTube approach, a smart YouTube plan, they actually are tailoring content that can answer questions that may come for the people. When the people are essentially thinking about a question and you have that answer, you can really address it. Yes? Julie, is that you?
No, I think somebody came on.
Okay.
People can mute if they're
all right.
Maybe Garrett.
That's all right. Let's move on. And then the number three, platform number 3, WhatsApp. It depends in which region of the world you are, but WhatsApp is still very relevant. It moves my region. I am from Mexico. If you don't have WhatsApp in Latin America, you really are missing out. And essentially, it fuels the communication environment in Latin America and other regions of the world. Instagram, of course, it's still 1.4 billion users, extraordinarily influential when it comes to culture, when it comes to celebrities, when it comes to visual communication and storytelling. Instagram is extraordinarily powerful. WeChat, TikTok, Facebook Messenger, Douyin, QQ. And in number 13, we see Twitter, which is still quite useful and powerful, not because of the number of users, but because of the positions of some of the users that really are important and of interest for people working in our sector, whether that is government officials, news outlets, media. Twitter is really still a place where a lot of the conversations that get coverage get amplified and essentially help communicate in many different countries around the world. As we continue, if you have questions, colleague, at any point, please feel free to use the chat, and we're happy to take them afterwards. Daily time spent with media. Globally, about 7 hours the average internet user spends daily on the internet. 2.5 hours of them are actually spent using social media specifically. We also see other interesting trends coming up. Podcasts, the usage of podcasts is growing exponentially as well. Very much growing over the last couple of years. And we see that now it amounts for almost 1 hour per day. So let's dive in a little bit more on this and how this specific usage changes across the different demographics. For example, the daily time spent using social media really changes across the spectrum of when we look at the different audiences by their age group. The younger social media users, specifically females, have the highest usage time per day, and the oldest demographics that we have data available from are the ones that use it the least are the males between 55 and 64. As you can see, there is really a visual, and this is why I really enjoy this graph, because it really tells a story about where, and depending your age, there is a likelihood that you will be using more social media or less. As we continue, we can also take a look at the different platform, at the different usage of the share of global social media users. As you can see right now, I know from Julie that most of you are based in the US. In North America, that amounts for 7% of the global social media users. We can also see the extraordinary percentages that are coming from Asia, specifically Eastern Asia, with the Chinese social media platforms that are only accessible within China. But we also see, for example, in Southeast Asia and Southern Asia, very big numbers of the total global social media users. When we take a look as well to, for example, the combined Southern American, Central American markets that mostly speak Spanish, it also comes to about 11% of the global social media users. So that also gives you an opportunity to understand the sizes of the different markets that you might be of interest for your work. So why is this important? Why is this relevant? Who are the audiences that you care about? I think this is an important question that it's not often discussed between us communications professionals. We tend to assume a lot of things. We tend to assume that our colleagues next to us know exactly who are the audiences that you care about. And that, in my experience, is not always the case. That's why it's important to continue having these dialogues, to continue having these specific learning lab opportunities, these conversations about social media, so we really are clear about who are we trying to communicate with. And why that matters, because it's also important that we understand who are we trying to serve. Are we serving our audiences? Do we want to create content that resonates for our audiences, for the people that matter to us? Or are we serving our organization? Are we serving our colleagues that, because they are doing very important work, they want us to share a quite complex technical document that is not necessarily will not necessarily have the highest impact on social media because it comes from the organization. So it's important that we ask ourselves these questions to understand, what are we trying to do through our social channels? Are we serving the people that follow us, our social channels, or not? Are we serving our internal audiences, with an external social media presence. That's important to continue having these dialogues and reflect about that specifically. Moving on, last week I was in Denmark and I was presenting with some colleagues from WHO and from the Danish Red Cross. While preparing for that presentation, I came out with this tweet that even though if it's applied specifically about journalism, I think it can really apply for communicators and professionals working in the development and humanitarian sectors alike. Our place in people's lives is not a guarantee. I think this is really important that we remember it clearly. We cannot assume just because we are doing an important work that will have an immediate digital effect, that it will immediately reflect in our social media presence. That, unfortunately, cannot be assumed anymore. And that's why it's important to listen to what the people are expecting from us digitally, social media-wise, every day, through their screens, through their phones. Why are we communicating? How are we communicating with them? Is this useful, relevant for them or not? We need to test our assumptions. I will never get tired of repeating this message. And again, something that we may have very clear from the last couple of years. Today, the reality is that the social media sphere is quite dynamic. Things change, platforms change, tactical work is really needed, hands-on experience as well. If you were working on social media a couple of years ago, today you will be and you, for some reason, you stop using, you stop working on that on a daily basis, you will see a massive changes. All these platforms are trying to improve and they try to have new features and new tactical options. We also see it when we consume social media content ourselves. It's really important to keep continuously testing and really asking our colleagues and our teammates if we believe and if we are trying if we are actually delivering on what we are trying to achieve. For example, in my organization, IFRC is the international umbrella organization for all the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies around the world. For example, the American Red Cross, the Mexican Red Cross, or the Syrian Red Crescent. Which languages matter? Officially, we have 4 official languages. In reality, all of them matter because we have a global audience that we are trying to connect with and we are trying to serve them as good as possible. Back then in January 2020, when the new coronavirus was still not very much addressed by public health agencies around the world, we detected that our colleagues from Asia Pacific had an important visual that could help with the evidence that was available back then. We made it available for all the Red Cross and Red Crescent around the world. And because of that, we saw that little infographic that the team in Asia Pacific created all over in Malaysia, Korea, Thailand, Japan, Nepal, Mongolia, Maldives, in the Maldives, in the Philippines, in the Arab-speaking world, Spanish, French, Greek, you name it. Essentially, that little message of prevention measures that was produced with the available evidence at the moment had a real impact, specifically for all the different national Red Cross and Red Crescent teams that had the need of addressing what people wanted to know. Again, these are challenging times and the information is dynamic, but with the information that we had at the time, we were able to make this available for people. So it's important that we always ask, what is realistic for you? The capabilities of organizations vary dramatically. Some organizations are investing heavily on social media. Some organizations know that it's important, but for whatever reason, they don't fund it enough. So it's important to always ask, what is realistic for you? I will share with you what is realistic for us at IFRC and what do we want to achieve. I realized working on social media that it's important that your plan or your strategy can be understood by everyone. So I boil it down to 3 words. Those 3 words are, we care about our presence. We want to be everywhere for everyone, every day in every screen. Just as our teams are out there supporting people in need, we want to reflect that digitally. Second, consistency. Align with our priorities with the right tone of voice for every platform. And lastly, and most importantly, shareability. Why shareability? Because on social media, if your product is not shareable, if your product will not be well received by the audience, it will get nowhere. The distribution organically for organizations, specifically nonprofits, it's really hard to get traction because the competition is really high. And it's important that we ask ourselves, will this piece of content be shared or not? Are we making our best effort? On social media, there are things that you can control and there are things that you can't. What can you control? You can control the quality of the content. You can control when you put it out. You can control in which format, in which platforms. What you cannot control is distribution. If people don't interact with the posts that you are publishing on a daily basis, you cannot expect a miracle when your flagship report comes out and nobody is seeing it. That's why it's important to invest on a daily organic social media strategy. And every time that you have something that you really want to push out, it's important that you also have a mindset to allocating some budget to pay for some advertising if that is what your objective is about. Accessible social. Julie also asked me to include a little slide about it, and I think it's critically important. Accessible social indeed is one of the hottest trends that is being discussed with my colleagues and peers. Thankfully, we have Alexa Heinrich, who is an extraordinary social media professional. You can follow her on Twitter, and she created the website Accessible Social. Essentially, if accessibility is really close to your heart, I strongly recommend you to go to her website. The QR code is right here in the slide, and you can take a look at the checklist that she put together. Essentially, understanding what are the most common mistakes that we as social media users and also most concerning social media professionals do that are making a difficult experience for the people that are looking at our content, that may have a challenge to for example, either read or listen to the content. So this is why it's important to take a look at this specific checklist, that it's a good reminder of how are we trying to best serve our audience. Julie also asked me to include some specific things about TikTok because it's the hottest platform and because it's essentially the one that everybody is talking about and not everybody really understands it. It's really important. Our organization was the first international organization to join TikTok, and we did it back then in 2019. The environment was really different, and we were really trying hard to understand first what TikTok is about, what is the TikTok culture. You need to be fluent on TikTok if you want to even try to be on TikTok. Why it made sense for us? Because our movement, our network is powered by volunteers. So we wanted to connect with the next generation of volunteers of the Red Cross digitally on TikTok, letting them know that it's okay. We can actually do some cool communication pieces, even if we are from the Red Cross. The journey has been long. We started with nothing. Now we have 3.3 million followers. That said, followers is a metric that does not matter. Remember every time you get that. Followers do not matter. Why is that? It's a vanity metric. It's just a reference that at some point, somebody decided to follow your work, but if you don't deliver consistently quality content, they will easily forget you. So even though now we have a very large audience, in theory, our TikToks are not working. They are not getting the traction that we used to get because we are not able to craft the number of TikToks that we were at some point. During the pandemic in early 2020, at some point we were putting out up to 5 different TikToks a day. That was simply unsustainable, and today we cannot continue with that rhythm. That said, a lot of lessons learned from that. We joined the platform at the right time in 2019 when nobody else was there. Second, we really learned about new ways of storytelling. We were fluent about the trends, which sounds are working, what are the filters that are using, and we essentially were able to do it because we have a great and hands-on team that could actually deliver on that. Unfortunately, some priorities have shifted and organizationally wide, and we cannot allocate the same time that we had before. To sum it up, it's really important to share with the world your unique perspective as an organization, as professionals working for an organization. Social media can really be a powerful tool for social good. I know that many of you have seen examples about that. I know that there's a lot of expertise available with the participants in this specific call. And that's why I really want to spend time listening to your stories, listening to your questions, and see if collectively we can learn from each other better. Lastly, I will just leave you with 2 resources that my organization created for Twitter. I know that Twitter can be really important for organizational communication. So those are for example, Twitter Advanced Search Guide. Don't worry about this. I will drop in the chat the link to this presentation. But if you want to download this Twitter Advanced Search Guide, you can take a look right now in the QR code in the right side of the slide. And the last guide is specifically for a guide that my organization developed together with Twitter for crisis communications. Essentially, when you are crafting a tweet, if you're working on crisis communications, you need to put 3 things always: what we know, what we are doing, and showing the people that we care. So we know we care, easy to remember. I hope you can find that valuable. The guide is also available here through the QR code. And colleagues, thank you so much for listening. Now let's have a real chat. We can also connect. You will find a QR code to my Twitter account on the left and to my LinkedIn profile on the right. I will take a look right now to the chat, and I hope we have a fantastic rest of the session. All right. And I will take a little bit of water. All right. All right. My mobile screen time widget shows my weekly average as 5 hours and 8 minutes. And that's just mobile, not taking into consideration the web surfing on laptop. You're right, Shweta. There's a big variety and variance in our daily consumption of social media. So it can be really, really challenging. Leticia, I read you. WhatsApp is used a lot in South Africa, where you are based. A lot of organizations include this as a platform to share messaging on nutrition for mothers, how to play. So even if data costs are high in the country, lots of mobile operators offer unlimited Facebook and WhatsApp. Yes. How do you deal with people that do not know how to read or write, produce videos to share on social media? That is a great question, Leticia. And one of the answers is, do you really need social media to connect with those communities? Probably not. Probably the other means of communication might be more worth it. That said, it's always important to come together with your colleagues to find the best solution that is most appropriate. Some of the, for example, one of the second most famous TikToker in the world, all the content that he puts out is non-spoken. He has not said a word. His name is Kabilame. Probably some of you have seen him. If you are on TikTok, definitely you have seen him on TikTok, otherwise on Instagram and other social channels. The way that Kabilame communicates is visually, with the body language, with his gestures, with his signature, 2 hands drop when there is a moment. So there are always ways to communicate, even if we are speaking different languages. So as long as you have a team that can always take a look at those specific gestures being accepted in the community that you work for, perhaps that can be an idea. Tatiana Venegas, thank you for your comment. How do you balance the technical info with shareability? This is something our project in El Salvador that works in human rights is constantly addressing, especially when working with lawyers. Tatiana, it's important to identify again who is your audience. If your audience is goes beyond lawyers, then you really have to ask an audience of non-lawyers what works for them. It's important also, for example, one of the questions that I use with my colleagues and my friends is about asking, will my neighbor share this? Yes, no, why? is this actually something that they will find useful? Is this something that they will actually understand? Is this something presented in a clear way? Is there jargon involved here? Is this a font that people can actually read? All these different elements contribute to shareability. Are you doing it in a video that it's well-paced? Is it busy? Is it not busy? All these little elements contribute towards shareability. And you can continue doing some tests, measuring some stuff, and you can also get inspired by what you receive in your own social media use. Since you are mentioning El Salvador, I know that WhatsApp is very big in El Salvador. So what kind of memes are you getting through WhatsApp? You can mirror those same tactics with a very different content and still give it a shot, trying it out. It's important, again, to understand what will work for your audience and what is the delivery mechanism. Perhaps not everybody is on Twitter in El Salvador. Perhaps you actually need to create some specific WhatsApp social assets that can connect with the people that you care about. Thank you again, Tatiana. Kirby, what advice do you have for measuring return on investment? It's so easy to get the numbers on engagement, but how do you feel confident it's worth it and actually making an impact on people's behaviors, knowledge, skills? That's a critical question, Kirby, and I think it's really important to have this definition and this conversation with everyone in your team. What is that matters and that adds value for your organization? It may be that your return on investment is that, for example, in my organization, that it's a membership organization, one of the KPIs that we put out is what is the number of Red Cross and Red Crescent societies that use our materials. For a global campaign, we want to say, okay, we want that at least 70% of our membership use our assets. That is helpful for us. Another important aspect, when I was in WHO, working for the World Health Organization, we produced a number of videos about mental health. What do we wanted in that specific campaign that I really liked? The call for action was inviting people to talk about mental health. The invitation open was #Let'sTalk. So when people actually reacted and say, thank you for this video, I want now to, I think it's now time to ask for help, we are now really delivering on the concrete specifics that we want. That's why it's super important that you define when you're having a communication activation, when you're having a campaign, really clear objectives. So what matters to you? If what matters to you is connecting specifically or having reactions to specific commitments from lawmakers, members of Congress, members of Parliament, then your tactics can be very different. So it's great that you can reach 10 million views in a video. So what? Views are not everything in the world. Likes and retweets are not everything in the world. They can be meaningful. It's great to have more traction, visibility. Excellent. But then what? Again, it's important to match that with your real objectives on communication and in social media at large. I hope that helps, Kirby, but happy to follow up afterwards. Catherine, would it be possible to share the accessibility checklist link here in the chat? Julie already shared that. Thank you, Julie, for that. Leticia, how do you measure beyond the numbers, like engagement with content? I hope my answer to Kirby can be useful for that, Leticia. Erin, as organizations become increasingly global, what are some recommendations to keep the social media content relevant to a growing follower base who might be in a different region where it's a different language? Should you start an entirely new profile to be dedicated to that region of language? Erin, your question is excellent. I don't know what is the right answer for you. It's important to take a look at your own analytics and see, for example, if more than half of your audience is not an English speaker audience and they just follow you because you've shared awesome photos, then you can have a decision and say, well, we can continue sharing awesome photos, but what are we getting out of that? So it's important, again, to find those specific objectives. Take a look at your analytics, sit down with your colleagues, see what are the reactions that you get from the people. It's really important to understand better your audience. Ask a survey, see around, ask around for organizations similar to yours to see what are their experiences. Sometimes it will be ideal to have an additional channel, but then there are less resources to manage them. So is it better to have one concentrated channel versus two more or less taken care of? That's a decision that you have to take, colleagues. All right. No, yes, you're hitting right, Kirby. I'm hearing know your objectives and what you're trying to do. Exactly. It's important that we know why we are here, what are we trying to achieve, and to have it really clear, to remember it all the time. Anastasia, you are working for Chemonics in Lebanon for a development program. Your current perception is that a more hybrid comms approach works best for behavioral change, utilizing traditional media to refer to our social media platform and tailoring content for your specific target audience. That is indeed the case. It's always important to know which tools do you have available. For example, colleagues, one of the things that it's really hard for communicators in our sector to understand is that links don't work on social media. It's difficult to say it like that, but it's true. Why is that? Because social media platforms don't have incentives to let you go. If you are on Twitter, Twitter will make your experience of clicking on a link very hard and painful. It will take time to load, and it's not a coincidence, it's by design. Why is that? Because they don't want to let you go. They want you to spend every possible time in their platforms. So what can be done on that? What is more important? That you drive traffic to your website or that you tell a story on social media? For example, on Twitter, you could do a Twitter thread, and that's why threads are so popular, because most of them don't have a link. Essentially, you can focus on telling the story and sharing the message, whereas you can use additional tools in the toolbox, like a newsletter, to share that important link to your website to learn more. That is important as well. But don't get focused only on sharing links on social media. That simply just doesn't work. And it's really making a disservice for your optimal social media usage. Okay. I think I covered all the questions so far, colleagues. I see, sorry, a last one. Can you share another example of your social media that ended up not working? Yeah, basically, there are several things that you can really take into consideration for social media. First, there are some vanity metrics that you need to be aware that your goal should not be, I want to have 1 million followers or 10,000 or 100, whatever. That really doesn't matter as a number. Now, if your focus is, I want to have 10 members of Congress following us, that's very different. Then you can actually reach out, make some intentional efforts to get those followings, because it doesn't matter the number of followers, but it does matter who follows you and who can actually see your content. That really matters. And that relationships are built over time, and they can really help amplify your message and take it to the audiences that are the most important for your work. Basically, yes, another important platform that we haven't spent time talking about is LinkedIn. Of course, LinkedIn is really important in terms of how you can connect with colleagues that hopefully you know already from your professional life and journey. And it's important to keep connecting with the audience, to keep connecting with your network. You never know what kind of opportunity will come up. This specific conversation that we are having right now was facilitated because of a LinkedIn message that Julie sent me a couple of weeks ago. So this is how opportunities happen, and I really encourage you to test it around. Erin, as a digital marketing specialist, something I found to be extremely useful with social media is utilizing paid ad features on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Demographic options have become increasingly robust, being able to generate strong leads from both platforms. Thanks for sharing your experience, Erin. Indeed, these are important tools in the toolbox that I hope, and with the challenges that we have nowadays, getting distribution organic, that means not paid distribution. The combination and the allocation of resources for a paid strategy is really important. It really matters to consider that within your budgets for all the projects that you take care of. All right, colleagues. Do I see any other question? Do you have any other comments? Do you have any ideas, any feedback, any criticism, anything that you think that what I said didn't make sense at all? Please feel free to drop it in the chat, ask for the floor, unmute your mic. Can I please the slides with you? Yes, I can. I will just bit.ly them right now. So we can actually measure how many of you actually clicked on them. So that's also important. Let me just stop sharing this. And yes. Okay. Sorry, I'm terrible at multitasking, but I will drop that click soon in the chat. Share. Okay. Okay, here it is, colleagues. Now you have it. Everyone in meeting. Here you can have the slides and feel free to use them, and feel free to reach out if you have any comments afterwards. Thank you, Segen, for joining. It's great to listen and to read your feedback. Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Gotianko. Thank you, Hannah Mosher. Thank you, Remy. Thank you for your thank yous. Colleagues, can I ask you for a last favor? For those of you that can, if you can't, don't worry. For those of you that can, if you want to, please turn on your camera so I can take a screenshot for my LinkedIn, so I can talk about how wonderful of a session we had all together. That would be really cool. If you don't want to, don't worry, it's okay. No need to do that. If you want, feel free to come and do some waving or something. I will take a screenshot. If you didn't turn on your camera, don't worry. I will remove your names from that. But if you turn on your camera, I will assume that we have consent for that. So thank you so much for your presence. I am taking my screenshot, and as I told you, I'm terrible multitasking. So please bear with me, smile, wave. Thank you, great. Awesome. Thank you, colleagues. I have the screenshot. I will post it on LinkedIn. So if you want to give a like over there and drop your feedback over there, that would be also awesome. And Julie, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Dante. What an amazing wealth of experience, really. Thank you. So practical, so helpful. So I put in the chat, thank you everyone else for being here today and joining. I hope that you found it interesting and can use it in your own organization. We will post the slides. If you didn't download them, we'll post the slides, the links, and the recording on the Tech Change platform. If you remember, we please encourage you to fill out the survey at the end of the day. Your feedback is so important to us, and especially this is our first hybrid conference, so we're learning as we're going. So any feedback on how we can do it better in the future, because hybrid is our future, we would really appreciate. So I'm going to close out, but the next breakout sessions are starting at 11 a.m. And then we will continue through the day. We have another learning lab this afternoon at 2. So please join us for that if you're interested in another sort of practical skills building session. And it's focusing on climate and what you can do in your organization to address the climate problem. And so a round of applause to Dante. Thank you again. And I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you all online or in person. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, colleagues. Goodbye.